Hello, welcome to WFUZ-TV, the People's Voice podcast. I'm Blair Castro, here with Thomas Jenkins, and we have Kristi Hagood, who's running for Baldwin County Circuit Court Judge, with us today. Ms. Hagood, thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
What in your background sort of propelled you to run for judge?
Well, I guess what propelled me in my background was being an attorney. I've been practicing law for 25 years now, and 20 of those years have been as a prosecutor with the Baldwin County DA's office, the Alabama Attorney General's office, and the Louisiana Attorney General's office before that. And so I guess because I practiced for so long, I know, and I practiced in front of judges all over the state of Alabama and Louisiana, I know how important the judge in the courtroom is. The judge is like an umpire. They call balls and instead of balls and strikes, they decide what evidence comes in, what evidence stays out. I know that the judge sets the tone in the courtroom, and being in front of juries and a lot of juries here in Baldwin County, I felt like with this new judgeship coming to Baldwin County because of the population growth, it was really important to put myself forward because I believe I have the experience that it takes to do the job well.
So can you talk a little bit more about your background? I know you said that you were a prosecutor in several different jurisdictions.
Yes. Okay, well, let's see. Do we want to go back to the beginning? I guess.
Yes.
Okay, let's start with the beginning. Okay. So I grew up in Jasper, Walker County, and I went to college at Birmingham Southern where I majored in political science. And then I went to law school at the University of Alabama. And, I can talk more about why I decided to go to law school, but I met my husband. We were the product of a blind date.
Mhm.
He was in his third year of medical school. I was in my third year of law school. My best friend Ann got married, decided it was time for me to get married. So she, she introduced us, and we've been together since. So how did that play out in my career? Well, because he had his medical training, we wound up going to several different places. So when I first graduated, I went to work for the Alabama Attorney General's office. And my job there was doing criminal appeals. And that basically means after someone's been convicted of a felony and they've been sentenced to prison, if they want to appeal their case, they have to file an appellate brief. And so I would respond on behalf of the state. And so I did that with regular criminal appeals, and then they transferred me into the capital litigation division. And so that's the division that works on the death penalty cases. And so I worked there for 2 years doing criminal appeals, arguing cases to the Alabama Court of Criminal Appeals and the Alabama Supreme Court. And when Lanier and I got married, he was already doing his residency in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I moved to Baton Rouge. I took the Louisiana bar and I went to work for the Louisiana Attorney General's office. So once I was there, I was doing recusal cases all over the state of Louisiana. I joked about this the other night, literally anything from selling crawfish without a license to first degree murder. And those were cases all over the state. And that was great experience doing trial work and appellate work. But then Lanier had he's a gastroenterologist at Baldwin Health. And so to do his training in gastroenterology, we moved to Shreveport, Louisiana. And by that point, we had a baby, and that baby had ear infections a lot. So I needed a desk job. So at that point, I went to work for the Second Circuit Court of Appeal for the state of Louisiana. So at that point, I was back doing appellate work, but this time I was working for judges. I was in that neutral position where I would read the trial transcripts and I would read what the plaintiffs or the state said. I would read what the defense said, and I would draft an opinion for the judges to review and sign off on. And so we worked there. I worked there for, till Lanier finished his fellowship in gastroenterology, and we came back to Alabama. At that point, we wanted to be closer to family, so we were living in Montgomery for about a year and a half. And at that point, I taught at the law school in Montgomery. And that was a lot of fun. I was teaching legal research and writing. And one thing that I think is so important about that job is no lawyer and no judge, and you can attest to this because you're a lawyer too, nobody knows everything about the law. But we have to know how to look it up, how to read it, how to apply it. And so I was actually teaching that subject to law students. And I taught 3 semesters there, and then Lanier's practice brought us to Baldwin County in 2009. And so we moved to Baldwin County. We had a 4-year-old daughter at that point, and our family grew. But when we first moved here, I did a few things. I tried I did some mediation training. I took some classes and some postgraduate law classes just because I'm a lifelong learner. I love that. But I actually went back to work for the Attorney General's office again here in Alabama. And that was great because I had the opportunity to do most of my work from home, but go to Montgomery when I argued cases. And then in 2017, when Judge Wilters became DA Wilters, I went to work for the DA's office here in Baldwin County. And since I've been there, I've been primarily doing child victim cases, child abuse cases, chemical endangerment, physical, sexual abuse, internet crimes against children. And I've also worked I helped get a unit off the ground doing white collar crime, elder abuse, and financial exploitation of the elderly. And now I do a little bit of all of those things.
Wow.
So there's 25 years of practice all summed up.
So what I would ask as a voter, just here's been my experience. The one time I've had to deal with a judge in the Baldwin County court system, she came bursting into the courtroom like a Timu Judge Judy, just yelling at lawyers, not listening to people when they were trying to plead their case, and being very dismissive. And I didn't appreciate it one bit, and I didn't feel like my case was treated fairly in the slightest bit. What is your, I guess you could say, bench side manner?
Well, probably pretty similar to what you're seeing right now. The way I believe that judges have to avoid the appearance of bias. I think it's important to treat all of the attorneys and all of the parties with respect, even if you're in a situation where, a judge has to make decisions.
Sure.
I guess 50% of the people are going to leave unhappy. But even so, you can still be respectful. Now, there are times when judges have to be stern. They have to take control of the courtroom.
Sure.
There was a warden in, oh gosh, it was Angela Prison. He used to have a saying, "I'll be as nice as you let me or as mean as you make me."
Mm-hmm.
And I think that judges have to take control of the courtroom, but I also think that I can't say we yet because I'm not there, but I do think that judges as public servants have to be respectful of the public.
Absolutely. And I say that coming from a law enforcement background. I was actually trained out in Calcasieu Parish in Lake Charles. And
I've been there.
okay, yeah. And so I spent a year in Elton, Louisiana, and they have a now defunct police department. It was absorbed by the parish, but for a time I worked over there.
Okay.
Got a little bit of, I full and well understand what you mean by having to be able to neutralize hostile situations.
Oh, yeah. I think I have to, I can be high energy when I need to be, but I think I'm pretty good at calming things down when I need to also.
So a nice baseline.
That's what I'm aiming for.
So I have a few questions. I'll start with the legal research and writing point that you mentioned. So that is, I think, the subject people probably need to learn the most. Just formatting and being able to properly submit things. I teach undergrad law at Pensacola State, but when I was in law school, I won, not to brag on myself from many years ago, but I won the book award for legal research and writing, and I would have the highest, we had competitions, blue book competitions and stuff, and I was all on it. I was like, oh, perfect citations, I was that person. And when, I'm 38 years old. When I went to law school, I had to go shepherdize the old school way, with the books in the law school library.
I taught that. So for people who are at home, shepherdizing a case means you're looking it up to make sure that this case is still valid law, that there hasn't been another case that came along to overrule that case, so that you are citing good law to your judges and arguing the good law, good applicable law on behalf of your clients. And so when I taught legal research and writing, the first assignment we would give to our law students, and maybe you can appreciate this, it was a 500-word essay on what is the biggest risk you've ever taken besides going to law school. And the part of it, the assignment was there were like 20 different formatting rules. Like you had to put your name on it, you had to staple it, you had to have a word count, had to have certain margins. And that may seem, and we would tell them at the beginning, if you don't comply with every single one of these rules, it will not be accepted. It'll be handed back to you. And half of them still got it wrong. But the reason we did that was because when you're filing documents in court, there are formatting requirements, and you could end up in a situation where you are under a deadline to file something and the clerk of court doesn't accept it because you didn't comply with their filing requirements. And so, it's really important for lawyers and law students to learn how to follow directions. But going back to talking about having to do things the old school way, we taught how to do legal research the old school way, because if you go into a law library and you understand where to find the things that you need when you go to use, like, say, one of the online resources, you can understand what it is you're doing online because you physically have walked the library doing the same thing, and you understand kind of what you're doing. Doing it online, you know what it is you're doing online because you've done it physically walking through the library. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So PSA for anyone watching, I'm going to interject my own opinion. ChatGPT is not legal research, okay? It is very inaccurate. You are not going to type it in and learn. You're not a lawyer because you looked it up on ChatGPT. Please go seek professional help.
Well, one thing that was really, when you walk into a law library, they're huge. And they're huge because every state has their own set of statutes. So you got 50 different states with 50 different sets of statutes and 50 different sets of case law on those statutes and administrative regulations. And so does the federal government. And that's why it's so vast. And that's why it's not possible for every lawyer and judge to know everything, but it's really important that we know how to look it up.
Definitely. So I wanted to also touch on you said you did some mediation.
Well, I did a couple of mediation cases, and I did some mediation training. And it was good, but it was hard being brand new to Baldwin County when I was doing it. It was kind of hard to break into that because that's the sort of business where usually it's very referral based. And so while I was in the process of trying to do that, I wound up going back to work for the Attorney General's office.
So I love mediation. I am like a mediation person. If I went overseas actually and did a semester abroad in Israel where was at the Hebrew University, and I did religious conflict mediation, and I got certified there specifically in Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I thought that was such a cool skill to have. And then I moved, I came back home and I was like, I will never use this certificate ever in my life. But if anyone out there needs somebody to mediate your Israeli-Palestinian conflict here in Baldwin County, I'm your girl. If that ever arises. But I like mediation a lot, and I don't like family law very much, but I did serve on the collaborative law board in Pensacola on the mediator side, and I just couldn't deal with family law in general, but I do like mediation.
Well, no, I think that mediation is a great option because it gives the parties the chance. Probably the most control they're ever going to have is in a mediation, because once they go into the courtroom and an order comes out from the court, then they have to follow the order. Mediation gives parties an opportunity to try to come up with the result that fits them best.
So I have another random question. I'll preface it a little bit with a story. The thing that got me interested in going to law school, I was always interested in politics, and I thought, like, poli-sci, pre-law, let's do the dual track, let's go to law school, let's do that. Well, when I was 18, I went through something kind of traumatic, and I had to be a witness to a homicide trial. And two people were killed. One of them was kind of an acquaintance, and one person was killed, and one person was almost killed. It was murder and attempted murder. And a very big law firm out of Pensacola was defending the accused murderer. and the witnesses and friends and family all got pulled into trial. It was old school. There wasn't recording on the depositions. It was just like typewriter style. And my deposition didn't match what I had said in person when I got the written copy. And then there was a lot of other procedural errors in this trial. And we were all like 18-year-old teenagers at the time. I was like, well, this isn't right. Something's not adding up. It ended up being a mistrial because of all the procedural errors. So we had to go repeat it all like a year later, traumatize the family and friends again. And like he got found guilty and life in prison both times. But it was just crazy to me that we had a mistrial because of these procedural things. And I felt very wronged the way I was treated by the attorneys. And then seeing my depo and knowing what I said and it not matching, and it felt like there's some things not connecting here. So my question would be, what is justice? Because I think do you think justice is served when there's, procedural errors, but the result is still the same? Or in your mind, is justice more of a substantive thing and not a procedural thing?
Ooh, that's a deep question.
Yeah.
Let's see if I can break it down. Okay, so on the appellate side, okay, so defendants are owed a fair trial, but the U.S. Supreme Court has said that no one is entitled to a perfect trial. Okay, and the reason for that is any process that involves humans is going to be subject to some errors here and there. And so when the appellate courts are looking at a trial and reading a transcript and looking at things on appeal, they are looking at, okay, is this an error that would have made a difference in the outcome?
Mm-hmm.
And so that is primarily what they have to look at. Like a mistake may have happened, but is it a mistake that could have changed the outcome of the trial? And if it is, then the person is owed a new trial. If it's not, if it's a mistake, what they call harmless error, meaning the mistake took place, but it would not have changed the outcome of the trial, then that's a situation where the courts, they'll acknowledge, okay, well, this is a mistake, but it didn't change the outcome of the trial. This wouldn't have changed the outcome of the trial, so the defendant's not entitled to a new trial at that point. And so I don't think that justice is going to be perfection for that reason, but I do believe that it's important that if there was a mistake made in the trial that would have changed the outcome, then I do think in those situations a defendant's going to be entitled to a new trial. And sometimes those mistakes can be really frustrating. Sometimes those mistakes may not be anyone's fault, or not the defendant's fault and not the state's fault. It might be, sometimes you have situations where a juror went home and did research, even though they had been instructed not to do research on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might find out later on that a juror didn't answer questions during jury selection, honestly. And those have been some situations that have led to having to do new trials. And it's very frustrating for everybody involved. It's frustrating for the victims and their families and the witnesses. But, in the interest of justice, we have to make sure that big mistakes don't happen. We have to make sure that mistakes that would affect the jury's verdict aren't taking place.
I did want to ask you a little bit about your prosecution in terms of child predators and
Yes.
predators in general. So that's something I think we all care about that, but
Absolutely.
and are passionate about. And I feel like in Baldwin County, I've brought forth ideas. I had a whole plan when I ran for city council about predator-proofing paradise. And I had people tell me, there's no predators in Baldwin County. That's not a real
I wish
issue.
it were true. I wish it were true.
That's a fantasy.
Yes, there absolutely are predators everywhere, and there's plenty of loopholes where they can get around the registry or are transient or are living in a temporary type mobile home or hotel, especially here on, Gulf Shores. We hear about trafficking happening at, different organizations or businesses on the beach. So
What's the moniker that they use for the ones that they can't find?
the transients or the unregistered,
Yeah,
like they're moving
something-
around. I forgot. I thought transient was the word, but
I think that's the word. I think
Yeah.
you're right.
So yeah, they
unmappable offenders.
Yeah, so there's
Yeah.
unmappable offenders on the loose out there.
There's a bunch. There's like 5,000 in the state of Alabama, and there's way more. That's just the ones they know of. So I guess my question about the predator situation would be, how big of an issue do you really think that is? Is it just me thinking that it's more than I've been told, or what's your opinion on that?
Well, I don't have numbers on that. So you might know those numbers better than I do since you've looked into it. Um, I know that that our different, like our sheriff's office and our different municipal police agencies, their the SORNA, I'll use it stands for Sex Offender Registration and
Mhm.
Notification Act. Their SORNA compliance is very aggressive, but you're right, it does come down to the ones that they know about.
Mhm.
And I know that they'll go out to addresses to make sure, because I mean, there are a lot of rules. Like you have to give them your current address, your current workplace, your current car. If you leave town for more than 3 days, you have to notify them that you're leaving and where you're going, and you depending on where you're going, you may have to register with them temporarily while you're there. And they'll go out to people's addresses and they will go check. They'll take across the door and take pictures and go back multiple days. And if they find that someone has left town without without letting them know, they will absolutely bring charges against them. So I know that our enforcement is vigilant on the ones that we know about, but you're right. Okay, if we have people that move here that didn't register, I think part of that breakdown is probably coming from whatever jurisdiction out of state they came from, whether or not they follow up with whether or not they register in their new location. I think that that's probably where the breakdown happens, but in terms of numbers, I don't really know. I do know that sometimes we'll have a case where, or I'll have, I don't, I'll get a case where I'll find out, oh, this person was convicted of a sex offense in another state, but they weren't registered. I mean, we do from time to time see that.
So another thing from a law enforcement standpoint that I had trouble with Louisiana specific was it really is a revolving door for criminals there. I have a vivid memory of working a call where there was a physical battery and person went to the hospital and I wrote a $500 citation, no arrest, no jail. And if I did take someone to jail, they were either released hours later or the next day, and they were just repeat offenders. And it's just in and out all the time. I don't know where does Alabama stand on that, and where do you stand on that?
Well, so Alabama has strengthened their laws on some of that. Now, everybody is entitled to bail according to the Constitution. Everyone is entitled to bail except for capital murder offenses. And then Alabama came back a few years ago and passed Aniah's law. And Aniah's law, I'm very happy about. It added to some offenses for which the DA's office can seek an order of no bond, saying, okay, because there are no bond conditions that can keep the public safe from this person or guarantee their appearance in court. If we can meet that threshold and show that to a judge, then they can find that the person can be held without bond. Okay, so those are kind of situations where a judge can hold somebody without bond. Now, in terms of, okay, maybe that doesn't qualify, maybe bond, they are eligible for bond. Okay, so I really think we need to go back and update there's a statute, Alabama Rules of Criminal Procedure 7.2, and it sets bond amounts. And so it says, like, for certain misdemeanors, this is the bond range. For certain felonies, this is the bond range. And that hasn't been updated in a very long time. And so I think that we need to update those so that judges feel comfortable issuing higher bonds for more serious
I was going to
cases.
say, so that's going to be a fee scheduling issue.
It is a fee scheduling issue. And so now I know our local judges actually recently increased the bond amounts on some of our offenses. And in terms of what we call it preset bonds, like I'll just give an example. If someone is arrested for possession of marijuana, the preset bond amount is X number of dollars. I don't actually know the exact number off the top of my head. And if the person can make that bond, then then they're out. And if they cannot make that bond, then they have a hearing, a 72-hour hearing where they go before the judge and the judge can set their bond higher or lower depending on the circumstances. So I do think for some of that to have higher bond amounts comes down to the fee scheduling. I think that needs to be adjusted for today's inflation or
Sure.
today's cost of living, so that judges feel more comfortable setting bonds at amounts that we as a society feel are more appropriate.
Yeah, we watched a video of a local business owner, I'll say. It was a bar owner, and there was video of him assaulting his wife on camera, full of physical contact, very disturbing video to watch. He bought it out for $150,
That is a shame.
like pretty much instantly. But uh, to my original question, are you hearing any instances of there just being a written summons for things like battery, like I described on my call? Because I was just
Not,
dumbfounded.
not in where police arrive and
Yeah, because that would be like I worked in Mississippi too. I would be taking someone into custody. That when I was instructed to write a
Yeah.
summons, I was
no, I'm not really familiar with that being the case here.
yeah, that was a lot
Not for something that involves injury to someone.
good.
I, I think we do a better job of that here in Alabama.
Good to hear.
So I think predators are a huge problem and believe we should crack down on them significantly in terms of upping the sentencing, upping the bond. And I think that we need to create a culture outside of the legal system itself, but a society where this isn't acceptable, where it's more out in the open and not so like hidden sometimes, that we talk about it openly, that we name offenders, and that we make it so that this is no longer an issue that people brush under the rug or refuse to acknowledge. So as a judge, what are some things you might do? I mean, your signs say you're a tough on crime conservative.
Yes, I am.
So how tough are we going to get on these repeat offenders
Between
or like
feather
sex
duster
offenders?
and wood chipper.
Yeah.
That's been that as a prosecutor, that has been my passion, is prosecuting people who hurt kids. And oftentimes, when we go to trial and we get a conviction, I'd say that we've been pretty successful with with harsh sentences. I have had cases where, I had one case where the defendant was convicted of sodomy in the first degree, and because the child was below the age of 6 at the time, or age 6 and below, and the predator was age 21, or he was over the age of 21, by statute, the judge had to sentence that person to life without parole. And I think it was absolutely warranted in that case.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've had other cases where we had multiple victims, multiple charges, and the judges gave them the max sentence, and then because they gave them 99 years for each charge, and they sentenced it to as a consecutive sentence. I've had defendants that were charged, or that were sentenced to over 500 and 600 years because the judges took it seriously, and that's the kind of judge I plan to be.
Recently, Gulf Shores Police had they had a multiple arrest situation. I can't remember if it was 18 or 23 teenagers, basically, and they were possessing weapons and drugs and stuff like that. Where are you on those kinds of crimes with juveniles and between 13 and 18?
Well, there's a lot to look at there. Okay, so in a case like that, you have to look at each juvenile's culpability, like how involved were they?
Sure.
Were they in a situation where they were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or were they the ringleader? You have to look at their age. One thing that has to be considered, especially if you're dealing with firearms, there are certain offenses where if it's somebody who is 16 and above, and it's a Class A felony, or it's involving a firearm, those are automatic transfers to adult court. Okay, and then you have some cases where, let's say maybe it's a 15-year-old. Okay, well, if it's a 15-year-old, or let's say it's a 17-year-old and it's not a class A felony, but it's a class B felony. Okay, in those situations, the prosecutor can request transfer to adult court. And so I think a lot of that has got to be case by case specific.
Hmm.
You know, I really think that what we need in the juvenile, you have to look at that. You know, it's hard to say just off the bat what you should do for
Sure.
everyone. But you have to look and see what each juvenile's role was, and look, were there drugs involved? What, how big a plan was this? Did somebody just get caught up in the wrong place the wrong time?
Mhm.
And go from there.
Going back to my what is justice question.
Okay.
I've been to jail before. I went to jail for getting in a physical altercation with a convicted predator who had possession charges, and I had brought these to him and said, "You're going to be turned in for this." Ended up him trying to kill me and me fighting for my life. And then cops came and took me and not them. And then I ended up going to jail for battery. And then I ended up thankfully having a recording of everything and getting an apology from the state attorney in that they took the wrong person. And that person is a like 10-time convicted felon. And for some reason in that moment, because I won the fight and they had more wounds, I guess, they decided to take me. And I really felt like in the end there was justice because they quickly realized what had happened, in the heat of coming on the scene. But I'm always going to, as someone who had always been on the other side of the law and never thought that could happen to me, having that experience going to jail, even though it was not warranted and later, completely taken care of, I was very appalled at how I was treated within that system, that it even happened in the first place. Like, it really shook my belief in our justice system a lot. So in my mind, sometimes justice is served, in that moment outside of the law, I think. And I understand that there are procedures for things, but also when someone commits these like terrible, heinous crimes and you're really like fighting for yourself or your children or your family, I guess my question would be, I was willing to take, the mug shot over the obituary. I felt like that was what needed to happen. And I'm to this day, like, I would do it again. I would do it again, absolutely. And in the end, the system worked out for me. But how do we stop those little gaps? I mean, like you said, nothing is perfect. There's going to be things, but I really think if we crack down harder on the true criminals out there who are doing these things repeatedly, then we would solve a lot of issues. And the people who are getting kind of like smaller crimes that might have some sort of justification or might be an error, there wouldn't be so much of. So how do you balance, where the pressure should really be applied?
Well, okay, first of all, I think everyone has the right to defend themselves. And so you're right to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, Sometimes people are limited by officers responding to a scene, or limited by whatever information they have in that moment. And it sounds like there may have been a delay in communication in terms of who needed to know what and when. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you. As far as how to solve it, probably in some way. How long ago was this?
It was in 2022.
Okay, so it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
Um, there are things that I think contribute to that kind of situation. And one of the things that can contribute is when law enforcement is overworked. Sometimes we see this with law enforcement. Well, we see it really in any profession where you have burnout as a factor. Sometimes when burnout is a factor in there, people don't always make the best decisions under pressure.
Hmm.
And so I think having more resources for law enforcement and trying to have more and better trained law enforcement, I think goes a long way. Sometimes, especially with, different, I don't think we have this problem in Baldwin County, but in other parts of the country, you see situations where law enforcement aren't respected. And you'd almost have to be crazy to do the job. Okay. So then you get into a situation of, okay, well, how do we recruit good people? Okay, if they're doing something dangerous with little community support, not the greatest pay, how do we recruit more people, good qualified people, and then giving them the adequate training and access to information? I think those are the types of things that could go a long way in preventing what happened to you in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, he can tell you that when he was a police officer, the pay was not great, and that's like kind of the big deterrent there, I think, for quality people.
Mhm.
If you're not willing to pay them more to risk their lives and to protect us, then the, pool you're coming from is probably not going to be as high as maybe you would like.
I mean, as a society, I really do think that we've got to, um, you know, I hate to say put our money where our mouth is,
Mhm.
but we have to be willing to give law enforcement the support that they need to do the job adequately. If someone's putting their life on the line every day for the rest of us, they don't need to take a vow of poverty to do it.
Right.
And so I think that that could go a long way in helping avoid situations like what you had.
I think, I mean, maybe there is this because I've never worked as a police officer, so I don't know, but if they just had access to people's records, I guess, before they're responding, like, okay, this person's, I guess they can pull that up, but in that instance, it was like it didn't matter, and all that mattered was like, this is what this looks like, and this is what this looks like, and none of this past stuff matters, but I feel like it should matter. It gives you context as to what you're walking into.
Well, I had a case several years ago where a mother found out that her child had been sexually abused by a family member. She didn't know that was going she knew that this person had a history, but she didn't know he was going to be at the house when her child was there. And when it happened, she beat the stew out of him. And in fact, somebody at the house called the police on her, and they called her. And she said, well, you can arrest me at the hospital
Hmm.
because he did this to my child and I'm taking my child to the hospital. And
Mhm.
they didn't arrest her.
Hmm.
Good.
They did,
Yeah.
they got the other side of the story. And now, I mean, hey, I'm not saying go out, I'm not in favor of
Right.
vigilantism. Please understand that. I'm not in favor of
Right.
vigilantism, but in that situation, I know for a fact that law enforcement, they took what she said and they looked into it, and he was the one person that wound up getting arrested. So, I do think that I know that misunderstandings can happen, but um, I know in one situation, I know that our local law enforcement did the right thing.
That's good. I have had pretty good experiences with. Not from here, so that's all happened in another county. But when I came here, I do think we have pretty solid sheriff's office, and I've been impressed with them. I know every city has sort of their different things, but the county as a whole is a pretty good,
I
great
agree.
sheriff's office.
I agree. I think that we have a wonderful sheriff's office here in Baldwin County. I think we should be really proud of our sheriff's office.
So I wanted to ask you too about jury trials because you mentioned
Mhm.
some of that. Can you tell me a little about your experience in terms of going in front of a jury? How many, I guess, a rough like how many times you've done that? What are some jury cases that you've worked where, and what's something you've learned from doing that?
Well, a number I don't know right now. I'd have to sit down. Most of the jury trials have been major felonies, so I may not have a huge number, but I certainly have a pretty good depth of the types of cases. What uh, As far as jury cases, most mine have been sexual assaults of children. Um, and that's the majority of the ones I've done. And I've also done some financial exploitation of the elderly cases. Uh, Jury trials are, nothing will make you more nervous. Um, you do everything you can to prepare for them. But once the jury comes in, for me, the nerves settle down and I feel a lot more at that point, I am completely focused on what's in front of me. And jury selection is really, really important to the process. The process doesn't work without our jurors, and it's really important. The way it works generally is you get a panel of 36 people, and the defense gets rid of the 12 they don't want, and the state gets rid of the 12 that they don't want, and then you have the 12 in the middle, and that's your jury. I would love to actually serve on the jury because I would love to see kind of the behind the scenes, how do they interact? That's one thing I guess I'm probably never get.
Me too. That's like my dream. I want to be a jury foreman, but they're all like, nope, no way.
Oh gosh, one time I got called for jury service in Louisiana, and I knew I wasn't going to get selected, but they asked me all these questions. Can you tell the jury what reasonable doubt is? Can you tell the people what does this mean? What does that mean? And which, yeah, okay, sure, I could do that. I did get a summons for jury duty here in Baldwin County, but I was also trying a case that term, so so I didn't actually. So no, I didn't get to serve on a jury. As far as I think it's really important when preparing for a jury trial, lawyers tend to speak in legalese, and we have to present our cases in a way that makes sense to the jury. The state has the burden of proving that the person's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so we have to brainstorm, okay, what are the things that could cause doubt? And we have to make sure we're addressing those issues when we're presenting the case. And so, we give that opening statement where we provide a roadmap for what we expect the evidence to present, to be. And then, of course, we put on all of our witnesses. And then at the end, we give our closing argument where we try to tie it all together and hope to goodness that we did it right.
Yeah. That's funny. I always wanted to be on a jury as well. I've been in jury trials, and people say, "Oh, it never goes to trial." I'm like, "Oh no, that seems like I've been involved in lots of stuff that's went to trial." But I remember the time I got called in for jury selection, and I said something about it was a car crash. It was like a civil matter, and I was like, "Oh, so are you trying to argue joint and several liability?" And they're like, "What do you do? Get out of here!" Like, no, you're not letting you on this.
No,
Shouldn't have said anything.
the question, is anyone here a lawyer? Anyone here have any kind of legal training? I always ask that question just to see if there's anyone hanging out there that I don't that I didn't recognize or something.
Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement in Baldwin County in terms of your family, groups you're involved in, civic engagement, and things of that nature?
Okay, sure. So we moved here in 2009, and my children had, my daughter Molly, she wound up going to kindergarten that following fall. So I was real involved with, like every young mom, I was involved in school and school groups. We've been active members in church here in Baldwin County. We currently go to Three Circle Church. I actually teach 3-year-old Sunday school. Now that my kids are grown and I don't have little ones at home, I really miss little ones, and so I enjoy being there on Sunday mornings. I've worked with the Fairhope Educational Enrichment Foundation. Some people call it FEEF for short. They raise money for the public schools there in Fairhope. I was on their board for 3 years, and I volunteer with them before and after that. We've been involved. I've been involved in the Republican groups here in Baldwin County. I joined the Baldwin County Republican Party, the Eastern Shore Republican Women's Club, the South Baldwin Republican Women's Club, the Point Clear Republican Women's Club, and the North Baldwin Republican Women's Club. And the reason I'm so passionate about those particular organizations, I mean, I am a conservative, I am a Republican, but I think that it's really important to explain why conservative leadership, how beneficial it is. I mean, conservative leadership is why we have nice things with relatively low taxes and good law enforcement and common sense government. And so, I'm a big believer in those organizations. I've had the opportunity I'm a member of the Eastern Shore Medical Alliance. my husband being a physician, I'm part of that group, and we raise money for different programs here in Baldwin County. Let's see, I guess I've been mostly active like through church programs. We went to Fairhope United Methodist Church, and I was involved with a lot of different uh, community programs with that. So between my kids' schools and everything, I guess that's where most of my involvement has come in.
Okay. So you guys are in Fairhope.
We are, oh, I forgot another organization I'm part of, Impact 100.
Oh, okay.
Now, Impact 100, that is a really great organization. It's women who their dues all go into one big pile, and we give out these block grants to really great organizations all across the county. And so that's been I've really enjoyed that group a lot also.
Does that impact 100 just for Baldwin County? Because I know I
They
used to
have
be involved in
impacts.
one in another place,
Yes,
but
they
yeah.
have it is, I guess, probably nationwide, maybe
Yeah.
even international for all I know, but the one here in Baldwin County I've been part of, and
Oh, that's
that's been really, I love seeing their work.
Anything else we want to cover?
I don't have anything. I have a question. I just don't like it. It's just
Well,
but
let us
it's
try it. Go for it and see.
We can edit it out if it's dumb.
okay. So every other industry that we see these days is being taken over by AI. How has AI affected what you're trying to do as becoming a judge
Oh,
or
that's
as being an attorney?
That's a great question. Okay, so I have seen pros and cons to AI.
Mhm.
So on the pro side, for example, okay, so police wear body camera. Okay, and then they have to come back and watch the body cam and then transcribe everything.
Mm-hmm.
But now there are programs that can take the body cam and transcribe it for the officer. Now, of course, they have to go back and review it to make sure everything's correct.
I would hope so.
But that is a huge time saver.
Sure. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so that's a benefit to AI. Another benefit to AI is, okay, so a lot of investigations involve phones, cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you have a case that involves multiple suspects with multiple phones, they have programs that can help link up the communications between the phones. That is a huge time saver. So there are law enforcement, and of course you have to go back and verify it. But there are programs there's some really good law enforcement tools. Now, on the other side, okay, as you said earlier, AI is not a replacement for legal research.
Right.
There was a case, it was in another state where this lawyer turned in a brief to a court that they had used AI to write.
I think we
and
read about
it
that.
cited cases that did not exist.
Yeah.
So AI is there are pros and there are cons to it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so I think there's definitely room, but at the end of the day, the thing about practicing law and being a judge is, okay, you're applying facts to law, like law plus facts equals a decision.
Mhm.
Okay, and so I don't think AI can replace common sense.
Right.
Mhm.
I wouldn't think so.
And so I think that, now could maybe in the future AI might get better at legal research, but even with legal research, and I think you probably agree with me on this, is your interpretation of what a case means and what a statute means and what what a criminal or some type of case law means. That still comes down to common sense.
Mhm.
And so I think there's some parts of it AI can't replace.
Sure.
The common sense, the humanity side of things. I don't think AI can replace that. But I do see some really good law enforcement tools that are available through AI.
I think in terms of writing a memorandum or stuff, there's formatting things it can help with, but the analysis I caution friends of mine who
Yes.
are just, I can't afford an attorney. I'm going to do all my own analysis with ChatGPT. Okay, you can pull cases, but that you need to vet. But like, don't rely on a robot to analyze and apply the law to help you reach a conclusion, because it could do that for the other side and will do that just as well. And I think the analysis and the application of what they are pulling is more of a problem, even if they're pulling the wrong thing or the right thing. Like that part, you really shouldn't rely on that.
Yeah, you don't know if it's even pulling the law for your jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And so that, I agree. I think that we still need lawyers for that. I mean, can AI help us brush up our grammar? Sure.
A little bit.
A little bit, maybe, maybe not.
And then you
But
start recognizing the same cadence in all these different posts and the same M dashes and the same, like, you can tell, like, this happened, but did this happen? It's just the
Oh,
same thing every time. I'm like, okay, I know how you wrote that, but whatever. Thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell everybody where they can find you online or learn more or follow you?
Well, thank you for having me. And yes, you can find out more about my campaign at KristiHagood.com, spelled KristiHagood.com. You can also follow me on Facebook at Kristi Hagood for Circuit Judge and on Instagram at Hagood for Circuit Judge. And as far as donating, you can go to my website and there is a button you can click for Donate Now. Any contributions would be appreciated. Also, if you're looking for signs, if you want to help knock on doors, or if you want to host a meet and greet with your friends and family, anything like that, go to my website, send me a message, and and I'd be very happy to help you help me with my campaign.
Thank you so much for being here. And the primary election is May 19th.
Yes. Please vote.